Hello and welcome to the Enterprise Tech Talk podcast. I am your host, Saumitra Kalikar. Now, this is the last episode of calendar year 2025. So, I thought I will take this opportunity to share with you some of the perspectives I have on the technology priorities for 2026. Also, what is the economic and geopolitical environment that we are going to operate under, and how is those going to shape our priorities and our thinking. But before we get started, I also want to use this opportunity to share my condolences to families and friends of the people who unfortunately sacrificed their lives during the heinous terrorist attack in Sydney over the weekend. These barbaric forces cannot divide us. Let's stand united as Australians. So let's dive in. Before we talk about the technology priorities in 2026, it is important to understand the broader economic and geopolitical environment, the macro factors which are going to shape our technology priorities. So if you look at the headwinds which we all of us are going to face in 2026, there are four which come to my mind. One is about employment growth. The overall employment growth in Australia is still slowing down. So that will be an important factor for CIOs and senior executives when talk about the technology investments in 2026. The other factor is about cost pressure and inflation. Inflation continues to be a sticking point for Australia for a while now, and it will continue to be the case in 2026. In fact, the forecast is that the interest rates are only going to increase in 2026 instead of going down. The other important headwind or pressure point for all of us in 2026 is going to be digital talent shortfall. There is a report that projects a deficit of around 370,000 digital professionals in 2026. And the last and an important one is around the emerging volatile geopolitical situations. Right? What does that mean? Is it is pushing the senior leaders to rethink the global supply chains for their organizations. It is pushing them to rethink how they can have more control all over our end-to-end global supply chains. So these are the areas we will be operating under. At the same time, there are some positive indicators. The one such thing is the technology investment in across all the industries in Australia is only going to increase. That seems to be a bit paradoxical in the sense that we have so many headwinds that we have to deal with in 2026, but at the same time, the technology investment is projected to increase by around 8.9% year on year. What it also means that it is sending us a clear message, and the message is that the board and the senior executives, they have started realizing that technology is no longer a cost center. It is the single most important lever they have now to not only address these headwinds, but also position themselves for the competitive differentiation. So before going to 2026, let's have a quick reflection on how organizations prioritize these investments in 2025 among these economic and geopolitical uncertainties. Right? And if I look at those, the four key strategic shifts which emerge. One is around artificial intelligence. Now, in artificial intelligence, most of the organizations in 2025 prioritize investment mainly around GenAI. The most of the investment was around realizing quick benefits through productivity use cases. Some organizations also explored around agentic AI, uh, and ran some pilots to test the technologies as well as to test the new ROI models. But I think overall it is fair to say that in 2025, artificial intelligence has not realized any significant business benefits for organizations, which can be attributed to key business metrics. The other strategic shift that has emerged in 2025 is around digital sovereignty. What I mean by that is organizations are more and more looking at having a more control around their data and their critical assets. Right. So few shifts which have occurred there are organizations have started optimizing their vendor landscape, also managing risks not only within the technology operations but across the overall vendor ecosystem. Other thing that has emerged is better financial management of, or what is called as FinOps, across the technology operations, moving beyond just cloud FinOps. And also focusing on sovereign clouds. And this has emerged as a key priority for particularly with government organizations. The other strategic shift that has emerged in 2025 is cybersecurity, and that's probably not a surprise, given the cyber attacks, major cyber attacks that have happened over 2-3 years across many Australian organizations. So in 2025, organizations pivoted to more investment in cybersecurity, primarily to uplift, mature their existing cybersecurity functions and meeting the immediate needs. So that has been the focus on in 2025. In 2026, it is expected that organizations will start taking much more strategic approach in building robust cybersecurity capabilities. The other strategic shift that emerged in 2025 was around governance and compliance. And this is again no surprise given the cyber attacks and the need for digital sovereignty and emerging AI use cases that is pushing government as well as the regulatory industries to lay out certain guardrails and regulations which all organizations need to comply with. A good example of that is in 2025 for financial and insurance industries. APRA laid on certain new compliance mandates called CPS 230 and CPS 234, which all those organizations needed to comply with, which are more focused on uplifting security capabilities, but also maturing their third-party risk management capabilities. Now, while these strategic shifts were happening in 2025, the chronic constraints around uh, cost and the ROI pressure, the overall skill shortages within Australia, the data risks around storing, securing data, but also better management of customer consents around access of data and use of data, those have continued. And the issue around legacy systems and how it actually creates a bottleneck to deliver more modern digital experiences to their customers, that issue mostly will continue to be there in 2026 as well. Let's talk about how these strategic shifts are going to evolve further in 2026. It is expected that in 2026, investment in these strategic shifts will continue, but it's only going to accelerate further. The focus is going to shift from meeting the current needs to more accelerated growth. So if you look at all those strategic shifts or strategic imperatives, if from artificial intelligence perspective, in 2025, while there was the focus was mainly around pilots and realizing small benefits using Gen AI tools and so on and so forth. In 2026, this is going to shift definitely towards more industrial scale deployment, adoption of agentic AI, and by default, that means that establishing a very strong AI backbones around security, identity, and data backbone, etc., with very clear consideration for tangible and measurable business benefits and outcomes. Part of this also is going to be upskilling technology employees and overall business users for better use of AI technologies. When we talk about digital sovereignty in 2025, the focus was more about cloud optimization and FinOps introduction, and also vendor optimization. In 2026, this is going to shift to a more hybrid by default approach. Primarily, it will be driven by the new AI use cases that will require better edge computing as well as cloud computing. The organizations will also start thinking about multi-cloud architectures for improving their sovereignty and resilience. Um, the other important investment is going to be around AI optimized servers infrastructure as organizations start thinking more and more about AI use cases. From cybersecurity perspective, last year in 2025, there was an increased budget of around 33% across the industry. This was mainly to build resilience and reactive response mechanisms. But in 2026, organizations will start shifting towards improving their capabilities for zero trust as well as preemptive defense mechanisms. Um, the other emerging threat that is going to be around AI-based cyber attacks, and that is something organizations will start thinking about, is to strengthen themselves from such attacks in the future. From governance and compliance perspective, in 2025, the focus has been mainly around addressing immediate regulatory mandates, as like the ACRA mandate for CPS 230 to 34, as I mentioned earlier. Initial understanding of evolving Privacy Act regulations, understanding of emerging data privacy concerns, etc. While in 2026, the focus will shift towards uh, overall data sovereignty as a key theme for new operating models. Then there is an emerging mandatory regulation coming up for ESG sustainability. Organizations will start planning for that. As well as importantly, from AI perspective, there is an emerging regulatory mandate around automated decisioning reporting, and that is something organizations will have to plan and deliver by 2026. So let's unpack the strategic imperatives a bit more in one by one. So from artificial intelligence perspective, the main shift that is going to happen in 2026 is, as I said earlier as well, moving beyond pilots and deploying AI at much more industrial scale. Right. What I mean by that is identifying use cases with agentic AI use cases, not just Gen AI use cases. Start building the foundations for agentic AI, both from technology foundation perspective and AI governance foundation perspective. Um, and then start making investment potential into new technologies which bring together different features for deploying AI, agentic AI solutions, um, and then start rolling out priority use cases in 2026. This also means that potentially, where required, there would be around higher growth in server spending. Not necessarily all the AI workloads can run on existing infrastructure. Some of the workloads would need specialized AI and AI-centric infrastructure. And organizations which are more advanced in the AI use cases, they might start investing into such infrastructure in 2026 itself. And overall, the organizations will start focusing on more high-value use cases in 2026. In 2025, most of the organizations focused on more quick wins, realizing quick productivity use cases. But in 2026, organizations will start deploying agentic AI use cases, which will be embedded within the critical business workflows within the organizations, and that will help to really shift the key business matrices that organizations are after. Next, the digital sovereignty will become a strategic priority for board and senior executives in 2026, and that will be primarily driven by geopolitical risks and emerging resilience needs. So now what it means for organizations is this will become an emerging mandate for architecture and procurement governance to make sure that the new technology investments are meeting the more important criteria for data sovereignty, um, and reduce vendor risks. Um, as well as there would be overall reduced dependency on global hyperscalers, particularly reliance on a single hyperscaler, and organizations will want to have options open on investments into multi-cloud environments. The overall computing investments will shift towards a mix of hybrid or edge computing and cloud computing, primarily driven by new emerging AI use cases, which require much lower latency. Apart from that, organizations will start shifting their priorities towards better data residency and meeting related regulatory compliances. Um, uh, Organizations will start looking at this as one of the primary mechanisms to maintain or build customer trust. Then there are Australian government is releasing new cloud policy in July 2026. That is something will be mandatory for most of the government organizations, particularly to invest into sovereign cloud solutions. And overall, so there is going to be acceleration into local infrastructure investments, primarily to having much more digital sovereignty in place. Now, most of the organizations already started investing more on cybersecurity in 2025. In 2026, organizations will start taking much more strategic approach towards these investments, building robust capabilities to future-proof them against evolving new emerging cyber threats over the long term. So preemptive defense is going to be the main cyber defense framework that organizations will start planning for. Uh, in 2026, there is likelihood of emergence of new new types of cyber attacks, which will be AI driven. So those would include high velocity threats, including flawless real-time AI defense deepfakes, which will create the crisis of authenticity and identity itself. So as a strategic response, organizations will be forced to enforce zero trust across every human, machine, and AI agent interaction. The board will need to make sure that all the critical assets, crown jewels within their organizations have rigorous defense mechanisms in place. The new preemptive defense mechanisms are invested into, as well as the overall supplier network, supplier ecosystem is assessed for managing and reducing the third-party risks. Now, from regulatory mandates and deadlines perspective, there are three main emerging regulatory mandates that come to my mind, which are applicable to almost all big enterprises within Australia. This, of course, does not include any industry-specific regulatory mandates, for example, for healthcare or financial industry, etc., that those specific organizations will have to still comply with. So in 2026, one emerging mandate, which is actually ending the 2-year grace period, is around automated decisions related provisions, which are part of the Privacy Act reform. So most of the organizations will have to make sure that the responsible AI frameworks are in place, which focus on greater auditability, transparency, and human oversight for all AI and ML-related models, which impact their customers or citizens. The other emerging mandate is around government cloud policy. So that's a policy that commences by July 2026. Um, uh, and all the government organizations in particular, public sector organizations and their enterprise partners, they will have to formalize their hybrid and sovereign cloud strategies to control data residencies and operational autonomy. The other emerging mandate that comes to my mind is around sustainability reporting. So that is a new mandate Australia is rolling out, called IFRS S1/S2, particularly for large businesses. And expectation is that all these large businesses will meet that standard throughout 2027. What it means that in 2026, organizations will start exploring the options, including the technology platforms and solutions which are required to meet standard. So what these four strategic imperatives mean for technology leaders and CIOs? In my view, the CIOs can take away four key actions for their consideration. The first one is focusing on better governance, particularly the data governance and ethical AI governance, establishing and maturing those frameworks before they can plan for safe and scalable agentic AI adoption. So that's point number one. The action number two is they can think of how to fund these transformative initiatives, particularly for agentic AI. And that could be done through reducing the technology complexity and technology debt, which would potentially release productivity savings, which can be repurposed for investment into better AI infrastructure. Point number three, or action number three, it could be around correcting for hybrid sovereignty. What I mean by that is, while CIOs and technology leaders are investing into expansion into cloud, at the same time, they will have to start thinking about investment into edge computing. This will become more and more relevant as organizations start rolling out more agentic AI use cases, which require much lower latency. And finally, with introduction of agentic AI, the overall ways of working in an operating model may look different. There will be increasing a human agent hybrid workforce, which would mean that new technology skills are required, which would mean that new types of roles are to be established. So CIOs and technology leaders will need to start planning for those new emerging operating models for the organizations. So in conclusion, the 2026 is going to be a critical pivot point for CIOs and technology leaders. We are at a critical intersection point with accelerating technology disruption, increasing competitive pressure, and emerging greater governance requirements stemming from global disruptions and the new national policy directives. So I will leave you with the one last message, and that is, the competitive advantage in 2026 will not belong to those who adopt the most technology, but to those who lead with the intent in industrializing agentic AI at scale, anchoring in sovereignty, resilience, and disciplined governance. Thank you. Hope you liked today's episode. Please subscribe us on YouTube, LinkedIn, and X platforms. Also, if you are passionate about any such enterprise technology topics, and want to participate in the discussion, please reach out at inquiry@enterprisetech.com. Also, please visit the website www.enterprisetech.com for more details.